Welcome to the Every Brain is Different podcast. It is Samantha and Lauren here with you, and today we have Suzanne Jabour. And Suzanne is a grieving mom who has found meaning in her loss through providing grief education. She shares how grief really works and how we can support people experiencing it. She guides grievers to chart their own path through her conscious and curious grief method. She offers workshops to share the information, skills, and tools that allow us to respond to grief in a more meaningful way. Her TEDx talk, Grief is Hard, Let's Do Better, is changing how we understand and respond to grief. She is a certified grief educator, a transformational coach, and a workshop leader. Welcome to the show, Suzanne. I'm super excited to have you.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to give a little bit of context for why I wanted to have you on this show, because people might be like, what grief? What are we talking about? Of course.
Like one of those, like now for something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. So of course people will experience like the typical things for grief, like a loved one passing away or stuff like that. But what I wanted to talk about today was the grief that comes with a diagnosis. And that is not saying that like people, when we get our kids' diagnosis, that it's bad or wrong or something like that. But there is a grief that sometimes comes to some parents where the life that they imagined for their kid is gone.
Yeah.
And they feel bad for grieving, but I think it's a natural response that like when I had my kids, this is a very, very, very minor. But when I had my kids, I was like, I'm going to do music with them. I'm going to take them to all the mommy and me classes, and they're going to play piano and all this stuff, right? And because of sensory issues, one of my kids, he did not handle the mommy and me classes. He did not want to go. And I did. I grieved. And that was a small thing, but I still was grieving the life that I thought I was going to have with him that I didn't have. And like I said, that's a very small thing, but there are bigger things that happen. If you have a kid with severe disabilities and they're going to have to maybe live with you forever, and that's okay, but you're going to grieve the life that you thought they were going to have. And so I just want to talk to you about that and just get your insights into that.
Yes, 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 and yes. And what I think is really interesting and came to me when you were talking is I absolutely want to echo that thought that it doesn't mean we love our kids any less, or we think there's something wrong with them, or that the diagnosis means they're bad or not as worthy or any of those things. It doesn't mean any of that you have these big feelings about, well, crap, like this isn't what I had planned. And what I think is so important to understand is when we grieve what we've lost, then we're able to really put ourselves wholeheartedly into what we have. Because as long as we're kind of denying that sense of there being something worth allowing all of those emotions for, and we're trying to sort of hold them at bay, we're really kind of constricting our ability to interact, to be powerful. Like I had a special needs kid in a way that's related to a lot of what you were all going through. Ben was diagnosed as 99th percentile gifted. So there's nothing in the school system that was for him. And I was having to have arguments with I remember very particularly an argument with his grade 8 English teacher who couldn't understand why Ben didn't love the novel the class was all reading. And they were reading some grade 8 appropriate reading level and story level book that Ben thought was stupid because his self-selected summer reading book between grade 3 and grade 4 was Moby Dick. So you want that kid to read some stupid YA, coming of age story. He's like, Mom, this is dumb. I don't want to do it. But we're having to have those conversations. We're having to advocate for our kids. We're having to fight for them for what they need to have the fullness of the life that they deserve and should have. And to do that, we have to be really clear on our emotional stuff. And if we're pretending that everything's okay and there's like nothing to see here, folks, we're distancing ourselves from the reality. And I think it ends up distancing us from our kids and what they need, because we're still kind of pretending in a weird kind of way. I don't know if that makes sense to you as a parent, but
That totally makes sense. If you don't accept the diagnosis and you're always in the, like, you might say, I accept this, this is the way my kid is, and whatever, but in the back of your mind, like, maybe he'll do this instead. Maybe he'll do this instead. Maybe it will be like I always wanted.
Yeah.
And you're not accepting your full kid. And then I think you're not parenting in the way that they need to be parented because you're trying to parent them into what you think they should be.
Yeah.
And so, yes, that totally makes sense to me. Do you have any recommendations for how people can go through that? First of all, accepting the diagnosis, because I know, and this is nothing against dads, but especially a lot of dads
Hmm.
do not accept it when their kids get an autism diagnosis or another disability diagnosis when they can't see the disability.
Yeah.
And so they're like, no, my kid's not like that. They aren't like that. They're normal. Or they say those things
Yeah.
and they act like something is wrong with having autism, which there's not. And so, how do you first accept what has been done, accept the diagnosis, and then accept that your child needs to be parented differently or is going to live a different life than you expected?
I think that acceptance piece is so critical. And if you feel like you're kind of resisting that, or you're feeling like you don't want to put a label on it, like a lot of time we struggle with labels. What I would say is embrace that label because the system needs it. So even if you want to stay as open minded to possibility and potential and all the things, which we absolutely do, the system, the education system, the benefits system, the government system, all the systems, they need a label. And so if you can just accept it at that level as the best way that you can then advocate for what your child needs, whether you think it's the right label or it's exactly right, or there might be something else, because so often there's co-concurrent things going on. I absolutely, knowing now what I know about autism, I absolutely think Ben was autistic. And his child psychologist and I talked about it often. And then a few years ago, it was just before he died or just after he died, I can't remember, but I was listening to a podcast about how autism shows up differently in women. And when I listened to that list of what you should be looking for in women, he had almost all of the markers. So I'm actually quite sure that that was a diagnosis he probably should have had. We didn't need it, so I didn't advocate for it. I needed the gifted one. And so I fought really hard to get it because I didn't care. I knew that his brain did not work the same way as his sister's. And I knew that for me to be able to get him what he was going to need and be able to have some teeth behind me when I was having that fight with the grade 8 English teacher, I was going to need that diagnosis. So you can look at it through a different lens. If you're really resisting the ways that a diagnosis can be a negative, that having that label or that stigma, if that's how you view it, or you worry that other people might view it, there's another lens to acceptances, which is that we just understand that's how the system is designed. We get that our kids are great. They're unique and different, and they have different needs. That's just different. It's not good or bad. But the system needs them to have that label. So take the label for the system if you don't want it as a way that you view your child. You can accept it that way and have your view of your child be whatever feels healthy for you.
That's amazing. And I love that answer because I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder like 10 years ago. I did not feel like I had bipolar disorder. My psychiatrist that diagnosed me said, I don't know if this is what you really have, but insurance needs it to get you the help that you need. So until we figure out like what like your actual diagnosis, she said you hit enough markers for bipolar disorder that we're going to diagnose you with that even though you don't really fit in that box. But that's what the system needs. And
Yeah.
so if your kid gets a diagnosis that opens up resources for them because I couldn't get like medication that I needed or the counseling that I needed without a diagnosis. And then later we got the right diagnosis. I actually had ADHD instead of bipolar disorder. But that's what I always tell parents. If you need resources, get the diagnosis because it opens up doors for your kid. And like you said, if only you can accept it on that one level, like the system level, just know that the system needs this and I'm going to get resources for my kid. I think that makes it worth it. And I just want to clarify something. When I said before, like thinking about what your kid could be and all that, obviously stay open to possibilities because
Yeah.
I know kids that when they were younger, the doctor was like, they'll never get married, they'll never have a girlfriend, they'll never have friends, they'll never do this, they'll never go to college, whatever. And I know kids that are doing all those things when
Yeah.
the doctor said that they never would. So it's not really accepting like this is the way this kid's life is going to be. Just be open to possibilities, but know that you might have to parent differently than, and it might go differently than what you're expecting, which I think
Yeah.
that's all parents, but especially with neurodivergent kids.
Yeah. And you can hold those same big dreams for them and understand that all dreams, they may never come true. The path to them, we don't know what it's going to be. It may be more windy than you expected. It may be less what you're used to. I think, especially for typical parents, like I'm a bright, typical person. I am not gifted at all. And I would just look at Ben's, literally look at his brain in awe, being like, wow, there's actually brains that work that way. Like my brain does not make those connections that way at all. But I'm going to find other people whose brains do. And I'm going to find you some of those people to be around and some of those places to be because I knew that was a piece that I couldn't model for him because my brain didn't work that way. The other thing that I think is so important about what you said about diagnoses is sometimes you need the first diagnoses and that first label to get to the right one.
Hmm.
So if you're resisting that first one, there's no path to the one that feels more aligned. So take that first one, just use it as a tool. It's a tool. It's not a permanent box that constricts anything. It's a tool we can use that, in fact, allows us to expand that box because we have resources.
Yes, absolutely. So once we've accepted the diagnosis, maybe that's where the grief comes in and it really hits you. Oh, my kid is different than I thought they were going to be. What do you suggest for moving through that grief so you can come out and really accept your kid like you were talking about and embrace who they are?
For me, in the way that I view grief, the first step really is to just embrace all the messy emotions. If we are trying to resist those big emotions, and I'm not saying that we can be in the soup all the time, especially when we have kids with bigger needs and different needs that are not as able to just kind of plug along in the system. We can't always be a hot mess, but you need to find times and spaces and ways to just let those emotions be a hot mess. I love to use a feelings wheel, right? So you just are finding those nuanced namings, right? Because we can be mad, sad, glad until forever. It's not going to help us keep those emotions moving because it's too much of an umbrella terminology, right? So we have to really challenge ourselves, especially if we're folks like my generation, the couple of sort of eras after me. I'm in my late 50s, but for sure from 40 up, we were not raised to be big and messy emotional creatures. We just weren't. So a lot of the time, we don't even have that nuanced language. So that's why a feelings wheel can be really helpful because you can start at angry in the center and then branch out to, oh, is it that I'm frustrated or I'm disappointed or I feel betrayed? Or there's so many words that feel so juicy in our mouths. We need to get to those ones because
Yeah.
it's that accurate naming, that nuanced naming, just the naming of it allows the emotion to move. So it doesn't have to be a big production number. You don't have to be crying in the grocery store. And if you're crying in the grocery store, I'm here to tell you that's totally fine. Every time I see an abandoned cart, I'm like, oh, someone had a griefy moment and they had to run for the door. So it's totally fine if this is happening in public, if you're open about it. I chose to be very open about my grief when Ben died. But if that's not you, that's okay too. It's literally a conversation with yourself. Like, how am I really feeling? And it can be especially useful going into and out of those really big meetings. Because if we can be less sort of, if we can be spending less of our energy pushing those emotions away and pretending they're not there, then we can be spending more of our energy in what's true and real and empowered to do what we need to do in the moment. So if you can have that conversation with yourself, like going into that IEP meeting at the, are they IEPs for you in the US? I was talking about,
Yeah.
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 Going into the dreaded, for me, always dreaded because it was just so stupid. Anyway, IEP meeting, necessary evil. I get it, but ugh, really?
Yeah. I
Anyway,
think all parents would agree with you.
we're
They're
not gonna
awful.
go down that rabbit hole, but you're
Yeah.
going into the IEP meeting, which is going to be so fulfilling and connective and warm and caring, right? You might want to have a pep up conversation with yourself in the car. Okay, I want to go into this. What am I feeling about it? Oh, I might be feeling some concern, some worry. I might already be disappointed because I know how this conversation might go. Okay, well, let's feel all of that. And then let's pivot to, but I want to come in with this kind of energy. I want to feel empowered. I want to feel hopeful. I want to feel ferocious, right? There were meetings where I had to go in full on mama bear mode. Like, you will not do that to my kid again, came out of my mouth many, many times during Ben's school journey. You will not do that to him again. And if you do, this is what I'm going to do. I will be phoning the assistant superintendent. I don't care about the principal. I'm bypassing him. For here, the hierarchy is you go to this principal of the school, the assistant superintendent, and then the superintendent.
Yeah.
And I knew all of those people because I knew I had to have sweat equity on all levels of the system. So if you can build that too, that's very helpful. Right. But I
Yeah.
would be like, no, you will not do that to my kid again. But I had to know that I had already dealt with how mad I was about what you had done to my kid, how sad I was that your ignorance meant that my kid was being misserved and underserved and wrongly served by the system, right? I had to have dealt with the frustration and the annoyance and the sadness and the longing for the system to be different. I never wished for Ben to be different. I wished because he was freaking magical unicorn, right?
Yeah.
These kids, they're all magical unicorns, but the system wants them to be a horse. And that's the frustration. That's the mismatch. So if we can be really honest about what's going on with us emotionally and allow those emotions to just keep flowing, it's a river of emotions. We're riding them. I don't care if you're in a kayak or a paddleboard or a yacht, doesn't matter. We're just riding that river of emotions so they're not getting stuck in us, right? Allowing all of those and then really finding places to be witnessed, to be able to talk about what's going on at that grief emotional level. And that's not to say that in our support systems or our parent groups or all the places we're coming together as co-advocates for our kids, we want to be in the soup all the time. But it's okay to say, wow, like, is anyone having some big emotions today? Let's just go around and name them. And then we move on from that. It doesn't have to be the sum total of the meeting. And if you know someone has something big coming up and you're the kind of person that can help hold those emotions, you could reach out and say, you know what, I know you have this big meeting coming up or this big whatever it is. Do you want to go for coffee beforehand and just be able to vent out everything you need to vent out so you go into that clean?
Genius. Yeah. That's awesome. I love that you talked about the ongoing grief that you can have
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with the way your kid is. It has
Oh,
everything to do with how your kid is treated. And
yeah.
I think the older my kids get, the more of that kind of grief that I have. That when a friend looks at them and says, "You're weird, I don't like you," or a school teacher refuses to do what the one thing you need them to do to make sure your kid doesn't have a meltdown. That's super, well, in my mind, it's super easy to do. But they're
Yeah.
like, your kid just needs to be like everyone else. He's fine. And oh, so when people say that, I'm not okay. So yeah, there is continual ongoing grief. Like you've accepted that your kid is going to be different than you thought. That's great. Your kid is wonderful. But then you have the ongoing grief of seeing your kid struggle when other people do not treat them as they should be treated. And I think that is the bigger part than actually accepting the beginning of this diagnosis,
Yeah.
because that is ongoing and you have to learn how to navigate that. I don't even know some of these kids, but then I hear this kid did this to me and this kid, I'm like, I'm gonna go punch a little kid. No, I'm
Right.
not. No, I'm not. But
But you sure
um,
wanna.
but I'm just like, why do you have to be like that? And just when you see, especially with my kids, they just want friends and they don't know how to navigate friendships. And I'm not blaming other kids.
No.
I get it. They don't know what to do. My kid's not acting like they think they should be acting. And so then it's easier just not to be friends with them. But I wish we had some way to just educate other kids about our kids. And this is totally a tangent, but that is something that I grieve
Yeah.
daily,
Yeah.
that my kids hate recess because they don't know who to play with. They hate recess because the group that they want to join won't allow them to join. Or the one girl is like, you can't play with us. We're not your friend. And then my daughter has no idea why. She's
Yeah.
just been excluded. And I think that's the hardest part for me is seeing them struggle wanting to be included and they're not. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's definitely something like the daily grief. And then your emotions will fantastic because sometimes you do feel like frustrated, but there's something deeper other than frustration. And I don't know how to name that, but looking at the emotions, well, that would be amazing to look at that and then be like, oh, yeah, this is what I'm feeling. It's more than frustrated, it's a little bit nuanced difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I could talk to you so much longer about this, but we have to go. So can you tell us?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Before
Yeah, I
ongoing,
was gonna ask you
before,
what,
before
like,
we
what
move
did
on.
you, yeah, what did you want to, is there anything else you want to tell our audience? That's what I was gonna
Yes.
ask you. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So I want to just say in response to that ongoing grief, right? When our kids are they're not getting what they need from the world. And one of the ways too to counterbalance that is to be really aware of watching for the glimmers or the micro joys or the moments where like someone does accept them or something great does happen. Because it's also so easy for us to just lean into our negativity bias and be like, oh, the whole world is terrible and people are awful and we're just all going to stay home and we're never going out there again. Right. But there
Yeah.
are kids that get it and there are families that are accepting and so how do we intentionally be watching for that and really watching because we're so protective and in protective mode with our kids, especially when they're younger. And we just want to like keep them safe from the world, even when they're older. My daughter's 31. I still want to keep her safe from the world, right?
Yeah.
So when we're in that protective mode, we're often looking out for the threats, but we're not looking out for the safe spaces and the happy moments and the stuff that's working really well. So if we can also put some intentional attention looking all the time for that, that can be really helpful too, to just feel a little bit more in balance and a little bit less, not that I want to diminish how hard this is, but sometimes it just feels, holy crap, this is hard. And
Yeah.
when we can see those moments where it's, oh, I picked them up at school and they actually were standing with another kid. They might not have been talking to that other kid, but that other kid wasn't running away from them or telling them something mean. Like they were side by side playing. They were whatever they were doing. When we're watching for that and then building on those little things, that can be really helpful with all of the griefy stuff too.
Absolutely. There's so many studies out there that show when you look for ways to be grateful, you look for things to be grateful for, you look for the glimmers, like it just makes your life better and changes your brain.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. That, yes, love that. So, if people want to talk to you more, where can they find you online? And then do you have any resources that you would recommend?
Yeah. So one of my favorite resources to recommend first, because I wanted to make sure I mentioned it on this podcast because you're talking so much about families, is a really great book about grief that's called Tear Soup. And I can never remember the name of the person who wrote it, somebody or other. It's one of my favorite grief books. I send it to adults too, because it's just such a good explanation of how grief works. And I know, especially if your child is in the part of the diagnosis where that emotional regulation and the understanding emotional stuff is hard, it's a really great book. And it's a kid's book. It's a children's picture book. So it's really accessible. So I wanted to make sure to mention Tear Soup. If you want a kindergarten style teacher read aloud, there's one on my YouTube channel because I just love the book so much. I was like, I need to do a kindergarten teacher read aloud. So it's me holding the book, pointing to the pictures. So you can find that there. It's readily available at bookstores. That's my one big recommendation for your community, especially. Yes, I'm very grateful I have a super unique name. I am Suzanne Jabour.com. I'm Suzanne Jabour on Facebook. I'm Suzanne Jabour on LinkedIn. I'm Suzanne Jabour on Instagram. All the places. I'm Suzanne Jabour. Super easy to find me. And yeah, I don't have a resource specifically for your community, but you know what? There needs to be one. So let me work on that and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, there's all kinds of things going on all the time. I have a free Facebook group for women who are carrying grief of all sorts. So that's another place to find me at Peaceful Grief on Facebook. And I do a free monthly workshop. So the themes change by the month, but I'm always talking about those on the socials and you can find those and join us there as well.
Awesome. I love it. you have been so amazing. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Our
Yes.
last question is, what do you do for fun?
So, in my secret life, I have long been a singer, actor, dancer person. And so I actually have not done it for a really long time because COVID and grief and all the things. And so this summer, for fun, I will be back performing on stage. So I'm super excited about that.
That's awesome.
Yay! I'm
Yeah.
so excited for you. That's
Love it.
fantastic. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Yes, thank you.
Well, Lauren, what were the highlights for you?
All of it. I think she was great. Something that I was thinking about as you guys were talking, and I apologize for not remembering our guest's name that came on, but we had a conversation about how sometimes we get stuck in the system or what the world has created as the norm, and one of those things being like, what does success look like?
Jessica
And
Frew.
yes. And so I think in that grieving process of my kid's not going to be doing these things, and just remembering like that's those things that you may have wanted are not the only indicators of success, a happy life, a fulfilling life, whatever it might be. And so I just think that's something to keep in mind and to, yeah, accept it for the system.
Yeah.
But there's so much more that can happen outside of the system if you open up your mind to it, and get away from that thought process of what is typical, what is normal, what should be. But yeah, I love everything she said. We're all humans. We all have expectations, whether we want to admit them or not. And when a wrench gets thrown into that, like, you're gonna have emotions, and you're allowed to have emotions, and grief is definitely one of those. And so I loved everything that she
Yeah.
said. And it really, something that really, really stuck out to me, especially with the diagnosis, is use it as a tool. It's a tool.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really good way to look at it, as a tool that opens up different doors for different things and different resources. And so that one kind of stuck with me. So, but she's great, and I love that. And everyone grieves, whether it is a death or a diagnosis or whatever it may be, a loss of a job. Like, it's a natural part of life, and you shouldn't feel shame. You shouldn't try to keep it down. Like, you need to embrace it and have your hot mess moments.
Yeah. I had someone recommend to have a day every day, not have a day, have a time every day, and maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half hour, whatever you want, whatever you need. And that's when you become a hot mess. So if you need to cry, if you need to just scream or whatever, that you keep it together and then you remind yourself at this time, this is when I'm going to be a hot mess. And then that helps you live your life so you're not a hot mess all the time, like she said.
Yeah.
And if there's times where you need to be a hot mess all the time, do that. But, you know, these are some ways that you can still live your life and have it not have the grief completely take over your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just what someone recommended to me that I really liked. And then yeah, using the diagnosis as a tool. And I love that she brought up the ongoing grief that parents have. I didn't even think about that before we started, but that's what I deal with the most. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's just the ongoing grief of not things that your kid does, but things that happen to your kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, with like ongoing grief, and I've heard this a lot, and like I think it can apply to more things than just like a death, but like grief and that stuff, like it never gets smaller, like the world around you gets bigger. And so yes, that may be an ongoing, but looking at those glimmers of hopes and those bright spots, and that's what makes the world around it better, and it minimizes it a little bit, so it's not all consuming. So
Yes, I love that. Well, if you're listening to this and you want to hear more from Suzanne, she is going to be at our summit on March 13th, and she will be talking more about this. And you can register for that at everybrainisdifferent.com. It is free, it's a free online summit. If you want to become a VIP member and get all the presentations from all the presenters, and then also get a recording of the summit if you can't make it live, then that is, you know, we're selling that $47. So you can buy that for $47. But if you just want to come to the summit, it's free. We would love to have you. So go to everybrainisdifferent.com. And yeah, we hope you have a great week.